Yeah.
Well, we might as well start talking.
Yes. Hi, everyone. How are you? Hoping you are well. Today we've been having a bit of little bit of technical difficulties, but we are here. And today we are discussing labels, part 3. Sorry, excuse me. So, what do we have? We have been talking about labels, labeling, the effect on people, but also the challenging that comes with labeling. So we've had 2 episodes already. Today is the 3rd episode, and today we're going to discuss something I think that came up because Steve and I are involved in another project, and something was mentioned there, and we thought that it was just actually fitting with the subject that we are talking about today. Plus, we have also other stories, as you know. We always discuss things before, so we have other stories and experiences we want to share with you. So I'm going to share a little bit. So what happens is that in the project is about families who have neurodivergent children. And basically, somebody who was involved with the project he mentioned autistic families. As you know, I jumped out, as Steve heard it, he jumped out, and a few other people as well jumped out, because we as much as we can understand, like, people are coming from different backgrounds, different cultures, and everybody has going to have a different understanding of the language that they will use or how they're going to communicate. However, would you go and say a cancer family? And I'm sorry if I'm shocking people here, but would you go and say a dyslexic family? Would you go and say a mental health family? You wouldn't. And that's the same thing that we thought as well. So today we're going to discuss this a little bit more. So thank you so much for joining the Wired for Success podcast with my colleague Steve Costello and myself. And today we are discussing labels.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Patience, about the quote I mentioned to you yesterday about personality flaws. So I'm just going to repeat it because I think it's a good one to use to kick things off, but I've kind of changed the wording around a little bit. So there's a question. The question is, do you see personality flaws in other people, or is it your judgment that's flawed? Just think about that for a minute. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but I would just like to ask people to think for a moment. And the reason for that is because I think quite often we label things, we label people, and we do it kind of automatically. We don't stop to think, it just happens. Why does it just happen? Well, let's go back to early childhood when we start school. What happens at school? All kinds of labels are being thrown around: the bright kid, the good kid, the bad kid, the scruffy kid, the smelly kid, all sorts of things are thrown around the school playground by pupils, by students, by teachers labeling some young people bad, good, or indifferent. So we're hearing labels being used from very, very early on in our lives. It starts before school, really, but I thought I'd use school as an example. So labeling becomes something that is almost inbuilt. And it's as though we can't help ourselves from doing it. And then I told patients a short story a little while ago, and that story actually reminded me of another story, which is a little bit different. Both are about labeling. So the first story is the house near my parents' house, where the curtains at the front of the house were always closed. Morning, afternoon, evening, whenever, never opened. The front of the house was kind of average. It wasn't special. It wasn't dirty or dark or anything like that. But yet people made assumptions about this house. Oh, they're lazy. They never open the curtains. I wonder if they stay in bed all the time. The woman who lives there, it was known that there was a woman living there. She must not look after her kids very well. She never goes out. She's never seen, and so on and so forth. Loads of negative labels were applied to this family. And then one day I met one of her children in the street. He was round about my age, and we played football together. And then we met some more and we played football together, and we got to know one another as kids do. And he was just a kid like me. And then one day he said to me, come and play in the garden, Steve. So we went and played in the back garden. And eventually, and the curtains were open at the back of the house, by the way, just thought I mentioned that. Eventually his mum came out and offered us a drink. So we went inside the house, and guess what? The house was neat, tidy, clean, all those things. And his mum was lovely. She really was. She was a nice person. I remember her very, very clearly. So all these labels that were being thrown around about this family were completely inaccurate. And it was kind of embarrassing, but as a kind of 10-ish-year-old, there was not much I could do about it, apart from tell my mum that I'd met this kid and his mum, and they were really nice and so on and so forth. So I did that, told my mum. And my mum got to know the woman a little bit. And at least for my mum, the labels disappeared. She stopped using them because I know she'd use them as well. But for the rest of the community, it didn't change much. You know, so that is an example of the whole family was labeled because the curtains at the front of the house were closed. That's crazy, isn't it? So, and then there's another story, and this is a short story. There was a guy, I used to see him almost every day. And this guy, the thing that I remember most about this guy is he walked really quickly. And if I would try to keep up with him, forget it, Steve, you couldn't. This guy could walk really quickly. And I learned after a while that he had two houses to take care of. One was his parents' house and one was his own house. And he used to walk between the two a distance of about 3 miles. Maybe that's why he learned to walk quickly, because he had to get from one place to the other. But he was labeled the weirdo. All sorts of negative phrases were used in relation to this guy. He was just a guy. He had neurodivergent challenges, though. I don't know what they were, but I know that he did. But yet he was labeled, and the labels were unfair. They were unjust. I wonder how he felt. I often used to think that. How does he feel? And it's quite a painful thing to think about. And then just one more and then I'm going to be quiet, because I think we do need to think about these things. So when I was around about 14 years old, I volunteered at a special school for neurodivergent children from quite young up to the age of 18. All I did there, I was too young to do much. We used to play. We used to play football. We used to throw a ball around. We used to play on the swings and so on and so forth. That's all it was. It was about being together, playing together, and getting on together. But I know that the kids who lived in that place had terrible labels, and I'm not even going to repeat them because they were so terrible and negative. And mostly those kids were autistic at various levels on the spectrum, and they had other challenges as well. But yet the community around applied these negative labels to these young people. Why do we do that? Is it because we don't understand? Is it because we're fearful? What is it? What makes us go down that road? I've already mentioned that we learn to label from very, very young. But what is it? What is it in our psyche that makes us need to do that? Because it seems to me that it is a kind of need. So what's it all about?
I think I completely agree with what you're saying here. And again, I know that I keep talking about this, but because recently this is what I am really into. So in terms of gene keys, so on a spiritual or holistic level, if I can say, so we have this innate, and that's in all of us, we have this innate need to conform to the grain. However, in us as well, we have the need to be unique and to be our own selves. So in the idea, I mean, if I can I can draw a little bit from what I learned about this. I think it was Jane Key 8. Please don't quote me on that, but it's between 8 or 9. That's for sure. But basically, the idea is that our society, the idea is that the way we've been brought up, the way to conform, and you will see that a lot, and here is not a critic, but you will see it a lot in religions. When you follow the same thing, you do the same thing, you belong to the same thing, there is no fear. You are then a friend, you are then an ally, if we can say it like that. What happens with us is that when someone is different, they straight away become the enemy. Why? I'm not too sure. But there is this idea that being unique or being different is definitely means that you are not, I don't want to say welcome, but it's a little bit like that, basically. And I think what's happening is that if we look at neurodivergent people, whether they're children, whether they're adults, or even if we look, they don't have any idea of the difference. They have no idea that they are different because they're only going with what they know and how they feel. So in that case, what happens is that the threat that somebody feels and the need to label is not really touching them unless they come in direct contact with that threat. And that this is where the labeling becomes even more dangerous. And I'm going to go even further. And I know that this is not the kind of podcast we have, but I think that we need to go that further so that people understand what the consequence of labeling can have in the world. Someone that I'm not going to name went and used this labeling to create an Holocaust. That happened years ago in the it started happening in the 1940s, but one person took a label, and from that label was able to move people, was able to invade countries, and was able to create an Holocaust. And actually, murder, this is murder, people, erase population, just like that. So when we talk about labeling, and here, like I said, normally we don't go in that depth. We don't go in that depth. We stay nearer to parents and children, but understanding how profound labeling can have an impact, and a negative impact in there. Obviously, we spoke last week about positive and negative labeling, but here we're staying on the negative labeling. And this is what's happening when somebody has got a disability, when somebody has got a challenge, when someone has got something. And here we're not only just talking about just a challenge as in because of a health issue. We're talking about any challenge. It could be that a young child who is in a class and everybody is really quick but unfortunately it takes him a little bit longer. There's nothing wrong with him. It's just take him a little bit longer. Yet, boom, it's going to be labeled. By being labeled, it's going to be on the side. Is there really a need for that?
Absolutely not. I think there are three things. There are more than three, but three things come up immediately. There is no understanding. And because there's no understanding, that presents a problem. The problem being there's no understanding, therefore I'm not really going to look to find out something about this. And when you said about the experience of, for example, the neurodivergent child being their experience that they understand and they get on with, and for them, that's them, that's their life, that's who they are. That's fine. I have a nephew who is almost 6 years old. He's fairly profound, what would be described as fairly profoundly autistic. He's non-communicative. I can't say that word today. He's a lovely child, period. He's a lovely child. He's got a beautiful smile. He sometimes gets frustrated, and when he gets frustrated, he gets angry because he's not able to say, help me, this is what I need, this is what I feel like right now. So we have to learn to communicate with him in a different way. We have to learn to understand his communication, because he can communicate, just doesn't do it like I do, or like you did, Patience. So we need to begin to learn how to understand that not everybody's the same as we are. And if we learn to understand that, we don't really need to label, because I think labeling comes from some kind of a need. So we can go down that psychological road.
Yeah.
But I think it's probably not the best for this episode. I think there's also, so I said the three things came immediately to mind. There is fear.
Mm-hmm.
Is it catching? What will it do to me? Will it affect my kids? I don't mean catching in terms of an illness, a disease.
Yeah.
But is it something that can affect me in some way? So there's fear around it.
Yeah.
The fear of the unknown, something we don't understand, back to understanding. And it is outside of our experience.
It is.
And it's okay to put your hand up and say, somebody help me here. What do I need to do? How do I need to communicate with this young person, this adult, or whoever it is? Somebody help me out. Help me out. It's okay to say, I have no experience of this, but yet we're not very good at saying, help, I have no experience of this. So what do we do instead? We label, and then we get away from it. And we run away from it almost as though we're frightened of it, that it's going to harm us, as I said a moment ago. So there are kind of three things there. There's a lot more than that, but there are three things that jump out immediately. So another thing that I think we need to think a lot about is, what is it within ourselves as individuals that makes us want to label? What is it? We can all spend some useful time exploring that question. Just see what comes. Just think about it for a few moments. What is it that makes me label? I know it sounds terrible, but we all do it sometimes.
Yes.
All of us do it.
We do it.
Yeah.
We definitely all do it. And I think it's having that that pausing moment, like you're saying, and reflecting and thinking, well, what's happening here? Is it something within me that is creating that fear? Is it something within me that is creating this need to label? And why? What is happening here that is creating this kind of reaction in me?
Yeah.
I think that's really important. Yeah. And also another way is like, so then I was talking earlier about the gene key, but what we want to think about is that in the world that we are living in now, conformism is always been used everywhere. So I've given that extreme example before. But if you look at it, conformism is the reason why you follow one politician or the other, or one political party. Maybe conformism is also something that there's this need of saying, you know what, I belong here, and this is what I want to conform to. And we can think of it of even countries. So, for example, for people like me or Steve who travel or live in other countries that are own, are originally our own, is different. But from somebody, if you were to take the point of view of someone who's never traveled, who's only knew just where they live, going into a new environment, surely there's going to be loads of labeling because they've learned to conform to a certain way. They've learned to live a certain way, and they're coming here and what's happening here? And it happened to me when I first came in London. I was like, oh my God, where am I? What is this place? Because London is such a multicultural country. Like, you go to Brixton and you're like, oh my God, am I in actual Jamaica or am I in London? You know, you go to Whitechapel, you're thinking, oh, am I in Bangladesh or am I in Pakistan? Yeah, there is this, like Steve was saying, everyone labels. But even when we are doing that, is it not better to kind of embrace the unique ways of somebody else than actually use it as a label?
Yeah, we can have some fun with this, in terms of, I think I told this short story before. So I was quite young, I don't know how old exactly, junior school age, and my best friend was a Protestant. I'm a Catholic. So what? For me, so what? That was the way I felt about it. He was my best friend. That's all Barry and I cared about. We were mates. And then one Friday, I went to dinner at his house and we had sausage and chips and some vegetable. I don't remember the detail, but sausage and chips, clearly. And when I got home, my gran was there and my mum. And what did you have for dinner, Steve? We had sausage and chips. On a Friday, you ate meat? And then it came out at a Protestant's house as well. So there were two labels being thrown around. but at that age, I didn't know what to make of it.
Yeah.
But there was a big thing going on because he's Catholic. I was Catholic. He was Protestant. He's Protestant. For me, whatever. And it's still today is whatever. When I came to live in France, I'd been here about 3 years perhaps. And a neighbor came to me and said, why are you here? And I thought, okay, fair question. Why am I here? So I told him about all the things that I liked about where we were living in France and the community and the countryside and yada, yada, yada. So I gave him a lot of why am I here reasons. And added to that, and I've lived most of my adult life outside the UK, which is true. I like to travel, and experience other cultures and communities. He accepted what I said, but he didn't like it. And he didn't like it because he didn't think that an Englishman should be living in his community in the south of France, which was kind of perhaps a bit extreme, but still big time labeling going on. So we need to think about our attitudes, all of us. Now, I'm not going to jump on a soapbox. Whose politics are right? The guy or the woman on the left, or the guy or the woman on the right? Who's right? It's a matter of opinion. It's a matter of what sits with you. It's not that one's right and that one's wrong. I had an argument with my father-in-law some years ago now, and it was a political one. I don't like to argue politics, but he does. So in the end, I'd say to him, look, you feel okay with that. I don't feel okay with that. So let's quit there. And he didn't speak to me for a little while because I said, no, I'm not going to discuss this any longer. But it was all about labeling who was right and who was wrong. And think about it. You get involved in a who's right, who's wrong debate. What does it do? It's tiring. It's draining on our energies. It creates negative energies. What happens when we are surrounded by negative energies? We may lash out. We may get angry. We may get frustrated. We may just want to retreat, or as the saying goes, we may want to retreat into our shell and not participate in what's going on around us. And that's all bad for everybody. So we need to think carefully about this whole thing of labeling. It's really complicated. We're not trying to simplify it or oversimplify it here. Labeling is a big thing and it's complicated, but it is something all of us need to think about.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one thing, so coming back to obviously young people or parents and young people, is that the more we are able to open a dialogue and have a dialogue about maybe the differences or maybe the uniqueness of others, the more we are creating, I don't want to say empathy. It's not really empathy, and it's not sympathy either. It's more of a way of understanding more about the world we live in, basically. Who we are, how people are around us. Like, for example, for me, I'm like Steve, so I grew up in a Catholic family. It was quite frowned upon, and frowned upon is a nice word here, to be, too much acquainted to other people from other faith, because we were like, Catholics. So, but the thing is, I grew up in the suburb in Paris. Who are my friends? Who are the people around me? Everybody. I had friends from Morocco who will take me home, who will feed me. They will come to my house and be fed my mom's food as well, African food they would eat. I had friends from the Caribbean, the Creole way, I had friends who were from Mali, from Senegal. You go in their house and they tell you to eat. They're eating in a big plate, a huge plate, and everybody's sitting around the plate. You can't go, no, I eat in my plate. sitting on the table. You join. So it was really difficult for me when I was hearing people say, this, and this is something I've heard many times, what I'm gonna say. These people, for example, they have so many children, and the mother, that's all she's doing, having children, and things like that. Like, and I thought, why are they talking in that way? Why? Like, what's the purpose of doing that? Because when I went into my friends' houses, I was never treated like a different child that's arrived in the house. I was like, sit down here with your friend, and everybody was doing everything together. Like, there was none of this. I didn't have this idea of like I wasn't welcome. So for me, later on, when I heard things like, because my husband is from a Muslim faith, and he was born in a Muslim faith. He was all his life he's been there. So when I heard people saying, "Oh, be careful if you go out with him, you're gonna be wearing the burqa, or you're gonna be stuck in the home, and you're never gonna go out. You're not gonna be able to do anything." And I mean, Steve knows, and I mean, I can do what I want to do. Like, I have boundaries. We all have boundaries, but at the end of the day, this fear is non-existent. So if I took it on, would I be where I am now? Maybe not. What are we missing out when we are putting label?
Yeah. What are we trying to protect? That's something else. Okay, that has a relationship to fear as well. But what are we trying to protect? Is it something that we should be trying to protect?
Mm.
Should we perhaps be more open? I just want to use an example that's right behind me. So the builders are causing chaos with my office. Well, actually, no, they're not. They're doing good things. So I am on, I've been calling it musical offices. So I'm in at my daughter's desk right now. And behind me there, you can't see all of it. Above that shoulder, there's a gay pride flag, because she picked it up when she went to the gay, I can't say the words, the gay pride celebration last year in Toulouse. Fantastic. And that, I think, is a good thing.
Yeah.
She doesn't label the people involved in gay pride. She doesn't label gay people. She labels them people. If there is a label, they're just people, which is fantastic. Had I put that flag in my bedroom at 17 years of age, my mum would have taken it down or made me take it down. She wouldn't have accepted it. Okay, that's partly about generation and lots of things like that and understandings, but nevertheless, it's a labeling thing. You know, so for me to see that flag is a very positive thing.
Yeah.
And I think there's nothing to fear. Why should we fear? Why should I fear that? Why should I fear what that stands for? What harm can it bring to me? It can't. It can only bring harm if I create harm in my head. Psychological time is what creates harm. What do I mean by psychological time? The time we give to thinking things through, to taking things apart and rebuilding them in our minds to make them fit what we think is the way forward. So spending too much psychological time on these labels just makes the labels stronger. And we don't want to be doing that.
Yeah. And this can create so much difficulties later on in a young person's life, growing with this kind of like, I think it's a bit like barriers. It's like I don't know if it's psychological barriers, but it's definitely barriers that are being put. They're being put every day without you really taking a notice of it. The barriers are being put, the barriers, until one day you are facing something or you're facing an experience and boom, it's like all of these have like this domino effect and they come and eat you, basically.
Yeah.
So the idea here, and the reason why, because we're going to continue on this, there's so much to talk about this labeling, but the idea as why we want to bring this is because we believe that it's a big part of how you can also help manage young people's, I want to say mental health and experiences as well. So everything we talk about, you can take on, obviously, and you go and discuss with your children. They still need to have their own experiences. So they will come to the world with their own experiences. So at the end of the day, if you are creating a freer passage, what do you feel is going to happen later on? And this is why Steve and I are doing this job. And we are here in the Wired for Success podcast, because you have to open up the path. You open up the path and you'll be able to see all that is in your child instead of like the labels that we can put. Yeah.
So something that I'd like to, I'm not going to talk about this today because this is a very big and very sensitive subject. and it does relate to labeling.
Mm.
What do we see in the media in relation to, for example, bullying in school? Too often we see, as a result of bullying, X person took their own life. That clearly is a big issue. Frequently, one of the reasons why is because of the labeling that was applied, and it got out of control. It got out of hand. There was nobody there to back and support it. Therefore, it became too much and somebody did take their own life. I've got a live example of that at the moment with a young person who has just lost her best friends because the best friends have been enticed into another group, and they used labeling of the young person that I know to get them to come away from her. So now, currently, she's isolated. And that's a big concern for our parents. It's something that we're working on. But labeling can be used as a very vindictive weapon as well, which is what it's being used for in these situations. Now we can get into the debate of why do bullies bully? Because they've been bullied at some point in their lives too. Maybe true. But still, we need to look at the labeling, and maybe that's somewhere we can go next episode. Okay, that's it from me.
I was gonna say something. I was gonna add something, Steve. So earlier I wanted to mention bullying, but I stayed away from it because, like you said, it's a big subject. But however, I feel that yes, first of all, in terms of the bullies, yes, it could be that they've been bullied as well, but it could also be that another things is happening as well. So, but we won't go too much into that. But in terms of like what I was saying is like how it affects the mental health of your child, all of this labeling, and as well as it could be from the peers, it could also be from adults. It could be from in your own house. And I just thought of it, but I had an example. So basically, when I was younger, my brother, so I've got brothers who are in Africa, and one of my brother came and lived with us in France. And I remember he was so strict or so difficult with me. And I think it was part of many things. First of all, our mom, she never left me. We were always together. He got left. There were so many things that I'm not going to go into it here. However, that brought a lot of resentment towards me. But I was just a 5-year-old, lively and, just living my life. So every time something would happen, it would make it worse for me, so much worse. And I thought, oh my God, like, what did I do? I always thought I did something, and I never did. I existed. And it can sound hard to say it like that, but it's true. Because of my existence, I was creating this behavior in him. And no one, because at the time, no one is going to take time to explain things to a child, to look at their emotions, to look at what happens with them and things like that. So all these things happening was creating now resentment in me, as in, I'm not going to talk to you, or I'm not going to be much more with you. So what I started doing is I started moving away from him, in terms of like not telling at school that this was my brother was in this class. So when we had like school pictures, I'll do my picture by myself. And then when he came to his picture, it'll be like, but my sister is there. And then be like, but she did a picture already, which I'm laughing, but it's not funny. But the reason why I'm laughing is like, I was using these mischievous ways to kind of like break away from him. That was the reaction that I had. Not everybody's going to have that reaction once, first of all. And second, thank God he never went further than those kind of things, you know. So he stayed quite low key, if I can say it in bracket. However, this, imagine, is happening in your own house. Can you, what is your house supposed to be? Your house is supposed to be a safe haven. Imagine a child that comes home and at home is being labeled or she is being labeled. How is she feeling? Where can she have a refuge? Where can she feel like this is my safe haven? Nowhere. So I think when we're checking ourselves, it's not just to check the behavior that is happening outside, but also to check what's happening inside our own house.
Absolutely. Perfect.
All right, so I think today's episode is way longer than we we normally do, but that's fine. We're happy to share with you all, and we will leave you, and we'll come back next week with another episode. And I'm thinking probably in some of those next episodes coming, I think we should talk about bullying and start to talk a bit about that. But yeah, but it was a pleasure as always, Steve.
Thank you, Patience.
And we will see you. We will see you soon. Sorry. Oh yeah, and we will soon see you, which is next week. You can get in contact with us if any of your children are going through something around labeling, but also around understanding more of themselves and for you as well to create a better relationship with your children. Just get in touch with us. Steve is there. He can give you a lot of advice. He can support you, and I can also be there to support you. This is what we are doing, and you can contact us with the details that are in the comments.